Yes, yes, sir. Give me 1 minute to pull it
Right.
up.
Yeah.
More, more chaos and more uh, they were like not. They want to like combat more. They wanted to do more, but like Jimmy Carter was elected because the U.S. government overreached its combat. It was doing too much that the American citizens didn't like. So like Jimmy Carter came to the presidency due to that. So inflation continued to rise during this. So 1960s, we saw the spending in Great Society and Vietnam War spending came 1970s. It's more or less continues, and like inflation continues to be problem. And like all three presidents were Nixon, and then there's a successor to Nixon, Ford, and then like Carter. All three of them failed to combat it. They tried multiple ways, and like it didn't help that oil prices were soared in the U.S. after OPEC did an embargo in 1973 because the US is a very big ally of Israel, and like many Arab states did not like Pal Israel due to it threatening Palestine, and like many of the OPEC states, the oil producing states, are Arab, so like they made a embargo on all countries that supported Israel, and like the US is one of the biggest supporters of Israel, so like because of that, the oil was that, and like the US oil production was stopped, was largely halted during this time because there's only a limited amount of resources. Like they didn't have the technology like they did today to like get more oil like otherwise that needed to. Like there's lots of other countries with many more oil reserves, and like the US was relying on them more, which put them in a very dangerous situation. And then many Americans lost trust in the government, like with the economic concerns not only, but like the Vietnam War, like it was exposed that US government was actually wanting to increase involvement from the very beginning, despite the leaders saying no to. And then like the Watergate scandal, like all these scandals and stuff, America did not like the government at all. They didn't want both republic everyone in the across everyone from like the not just the youngsters from the counterculture, but like everyone disliked the government. So like that was a very chaotic time in 1970s for many people. And like many people, there's also some good things like some music, like disco was the main thing here, but like that was 1970s, it was pretty chaotic for many. So like 1980s. So like this one is a bit more. This one is a bit more relaxed as some things come during this time. So like first of all, the rise of Sunbelt states. So like states in the southern U.S. So like many people are now moving to the south. This has been a general trend for many decades prior, but like it exaggerated in the 1980s. So like states in the southern U.S., like states like you see air California, Florida, like Texas, those are some of the biggest examples I can say. And like they're all very hot climates, and like they have year-round summer. So like it's kind of made sense for them to move. Many people move during this time because, and also like there's also lots of jobs and like lots of opportunity during this time. So like that was one thing that happened during this time. And then because people are moving to southern states, some of the industrial states declined when the industrial states is primarily in the north. So like New York, and then like Chicago, Illinois, and then like where I'm from, Detroit, Michigan. That's all industrial areas. As they made like they were the manufacturing hub of America. They were the driving force of the economy for so long. And like all of a sudden, this because of people moving down south and like moving jobs, and like jobs are shifting to China, as we talked last decade. Like there was opening of relationships with China, which allowed more jobs to be there in China. So like industrial areas overall declined here, and like this will be more of a trend in the later decades as well. So crime increased in many cities. So like this was like an actual unexpected rise in crime. Like many people, there was already pretty high crime, especially in 1960s and 70s. That was mainly due to the chaos. However, 1980s was not as chaotic as many things as like a lot of people they think, and yet the crime has soared in the cities because Sunbelt state the Sunbelt states came with the suburban trend. So like many people, like similar to the 1950s, like many people are moving to suburban areas, which is like outside the city, and like all the safety has been focused on those suburban areas, leaving the urban areas like downtown Chicago, Detroit, New York, Philadelphia, Los Angeles, all of them increased in crime because there's like lack of enforcement of it. And like there's lack of funding for the cities as well, which made them like not like clean or anything. They actually and like it didn't help that jobs were going away from like the industrial area cities like Chicago, Detroit, New York, which exacerbated the crime increase. And like the counterculture stopped as many of the boomers were born 1950s and in the 1950s after World War II. 1960s is when they get involved in the counterculture. Some of them get involved in it. Now many of them stopped that. They realized it's bad. And like by the 1980s, they realized they need to grow families, which is why many of them started having families now in the 1980s. And like it stopped right now because there's a new movement that came so like which I'll talk later. So fear continues to increase about Soviets from the previous decade. It's there's like tensions of it. Like Olympic Games were even boycotted. Like the 1980 Soviet Games Olympics were held in the Soviet Union. The US didn't go there. 1984, the US held the Olympics. Soviet Unions didn't come there. It's like so like fear was there. And then like the president at that time, Ronald Reagan, initiated some crazy military operations like Star Wars to basically like combat the Union and like press and like saying like because like we could go to war any second, they want to have the advantage. And like but fortunately for them, like the US was like having plenty of funds compared to the Soviet Union, because like the US, while they were getting richer overall, the citizens, the Soviets are not. The citizens are poorer, which made the US ultimately able to outspend them more in arms and stuff. And like it's kind of fearing the Soviet Union more. And like the digital age slowly rises. So like this is 1977 was actually the year for the first Apple computer was made, which was the first personal computer for many Americans. However, it wasn't too widespread till the 1980s. This is when like Nintendo released a lot of stuff. Arcades became such a thing, and then the Macintosh, which was in 1984 released by Apple, that was became the most one of the most popular computers ever, as many millions of people bought it in the US. And like it slowly showed the digital rise of digital in America. So like and like computer languages slowly programming slowly risen in majors, and like everyone was becoming a computer scientist in the 1980s, which was showing there. And then like politics, Republicans came back to dominate through Reagan. So like 1980, with the economy being bad, and like there's also some conflict with other countries, mainly the Soviet Union, and then also Iran, which was like a puppet state by the US. So like when it was in the 1950 trying to contain communism, they overthrew Iran's leader because they thought he was too sympathetic to the communists, and they installed a US puppet government there, basically a US favored emperor. And then like Iran overthrew the emperor in 1979, which caused widespread widespread chaos in it. And like the Americans were held hostage there. There was a very big crisis there. And like it was and ultimately Republicans capitalized on it, and like they took it. and they took the presidency. And like Reagan, as soon as he became president, he immediately cut down taxes like anything. So like 1920s, that's the last time like such a tax cut came, and like inflation goes down because of this tax thing. Though like other stuff, and many Americans started to prosper because they were able to spend money more with more dollars with ease. However, the rich and worse poor gap increased during this time, and like small recessions in like 1986 and like stuff. It wasn't a major one, but like there was some crashes that definitely affected the poor people, especially. However, the middle class and overall generally increased under Reagan's policies. And then like religion revival happened in the US. So like with the Sun Belt movement, there was also another movement. It was launched in 1964, but spread crazy to the 1970s to in the lead up to the election. And then like 1980s was when it was really the major thing. It was called so there's something called evangelical Christianity, and like it was spreading through the South, and like many people were becoming more religious, and like they began to put religion in politics. As like for example, the issue of abortion in the US, like 1970s, there was a court ruling that favored the abor abortion as well. So that rule that abortion is legal and like it has to. But in response, many re- Republicans and like right wingers didn't approve of abortion because like Christianity typically forbids it. So like that's the reason why I that. So like so like all these civil rights movements for women, for blacks, and like they all kind of halted here, but like this because like it slowly they were becoming it was like they were becoming better than ever. It was moving in the right direction mostly. So like there isn't really much of a movement now in the 1980s. But still Republicans came to dominate the politics, and like this was probably the best time to live out of all the decades we're talking today, because like it was economically more stable, and like that 1990s socially some of the crime activity goes down. It was kind of a continuation of the 1980s because like the economy was going up and like everything, and like crime activity went down because the US there's some tough prosecutors elected in like some cities like New York City, and like the US passed some bills to crack down on crime, and like that really helped the go down, and like the US starts to go more digital as internet comes. So like with the internet, like now you can browse anything like and like search anything, and like you know what the internet is, and like Google globalization comes as America's more integrated because the Cold War was getting over during this time, because like the Soviets, they were getting so poor and like economically broke, like they had to. And then like there was a new leader called Mikhail Gorbachev, which really set the bar and tone for like the perestroika, like all those policies that Gorbachev made, which basically made them, which kind of, however, which made them more open to the West and like made them open to democracy. It kind of weakened the Soviet Union ever further because like it allowed Soviet Union controlled states to like make independence and like get them to vote against communism, and eventually the Soviet Union itself broke apart, and like it kind of went again, and like all of them went against communism. So like that was the end of Soviet Union becoming a power, and makes America the only global superpower during this time, which made the which showed like which was shown through like the America's peace missions and like the Bosnian conflict, which was like a conflict within Yugoslavia, when like it was broken up in Europe. Like if there was some chaos among the ethnic groups, the US intervened to help send peacemakers to make the peace there. And then like the Gulf War, where Iraq invaded Kuwait, and like the US led 46 other nations to like go and like push Iraq back into Iraq. And they did it within 2 months. So like the US was US got more involved in the world, and like globalization and they with like the globalization, they kind of like basically the world is more interconnected. And since the US was the dominant power in the world, of course it would be the most influential in this era. And like they were most interconnected then. So like politics and economically, so like the recession brings Democrat to power. So like there's all those small recessions that occur in like before 1980s. There's something a little bit bigger in the 1990s. Is after there's however and like that was enough to bring like Democrats to power under Bill Clinton. And like Bill Clinton, like he faced a divided Congress most of the time. He basically 1994 Republicans took control of Congress because like it's all because some of Bill Clinton's policies were like very they didn't see as good, so like they divided Congress. Yes, and like this divided Congress actually brought in some good things because it brought first the balanced budget, meaning like Democrat Bill Clinton had to negotiate with Republicans in order to get the spending done, and like they had to balance budget, and it resulted in the first surplus in over 30 years. Like in the 1960s, ever since the massive spending, the US was just going under debt and debt every year. They were accumulating more debt. This is the first time like the US wasn't accumulating any debts and they were actually able to pay off some of that debt in the US economy. And then like trade deals came in the US because the US is more involved in the globalization and integrated with the world. So like there's NAFTA, which was a good example, which the US it was a free trade agreement with Canada and Mexico, which basically eliminated most tariffs on products between the three countries. And then like automation and outsourcing of jobs ruin industrial areas in the US. The continued trend of the decline of the industrial area, it was further exacerbated by globalization. It's like many more jobs are being outsourced to like China and Mexico, and like automation, which was more technology creating, like they're also like robots and like they cut the number of jobs required by workers. So like that also helped. In like 1990s, like it was more of a continuation of the 80s. And like Bill Clinton, like it was even though like there's some good things with the balanced budget, I think like there's some conflict with the Republicans as Republicans even tried to seize on a scandal by Bill Clinton. And then they even impeached him, which basically criminal charged him. However, the charges were later dropped because there's not sufficient votes to charge him, but still they had an attempt, and Bill Clinton became the first president impeached, which or criminally charged by Congress in over 130 years or something. 2000. So like digital age further goes viral as new technologies come. So iPhone came in 2007. That was like a major thing because now everything is touch based, not like button based and like by Apple, and like Apple was actually going down compared to BlackBerry and like other of those other phone sellers. But like Apple was able to turn it around and make now Apple and probably Samsung and Xiaomi, Motorola, all those are now the major companies in use of phones and like not BlackBerry anymore. So like 9/11 attacks come, which you probably heard of. It was like the attack on the two towers. There's a attack also the US government building, the military headquarters, the Pentagon, and like they even could have attacked the US Capitol and like the White House. Also, however, that was luckily diverted by one of the passengers on the plane. They took over and like they crashed it into a random field and there. Otherwise, that would have been even more catastrophic for the US. And like it was the biggest attack on US soil for over 150 years. So like since the Civil War, there hasn't been such a deadly your day. The 9/11. There's an attack called Pearl Harbor by Japan that initiated the US involvement into World War II. but that was still nothing compared to this attack 9/11, and it was all innocent civilians that were attacked, not like military people. So like 3,000 people died in this, and like it was a big deal because like the US never faced this in modern history. And in response, the Iraq and Afghanistan wars came. So the governments were trying to they needed to do something in order to respond to this because like this event, because this is not a normal event. So like they wanted to fight. So Afghanistan was the clear culprit, but then Iraq, they also tried to get Iraq into it, even though there's lack of evidence, but they just did it anyway because they wanted the quick, easy military victory, which they did. They toppled the leader and stuff, and like the however, it caused chaos between those two regions, and like which I'll talk about a bit more later. But like as I said, first we're popular because like there was a justification for 9/11, right? So like many people wanted to retaliate against those terrorists. However, the lies were exposed about them. Like Iraq in particular was very low. They told like it had like weapons of mass destructions. There were not any of those, and yet they kept on the President George W. Bush and his cabinet repeated those lies, and and it led to Democrats slowly but becoming more dominant in the power in getting the presidency. And like 2008, eventually Democrats got Obama to be their nominee, and Obama won by a big margin in 2008. So like that was and he becomes the first black president, which showed the progress of how it was. Like 50 years ago, like black Americans and white Americans, they're separated it based on race, and like there's no possibility that a African American would be a leader. And now Obama became a president, which was a major thing for that side. So like politically, as we told, George W. Bush was in power. He continued like the Republican agenda, which was like less taxes, and like he tried to do some other stuff which didn't really work. Like for example, he passed the No Child Left Behind Act in 2007, which was like an education reform bill, but like it really didn't do much. It didn't It's actually made education worse for many people, and like it made standard all those testings and like stuff, they were all messed up during this time. I ran it for and it and like America was already lacking behind in education, but like they became were lacking now because of that act. And like economic instability came because the rich and poor gap was more increasing from the Reagan era, 1980s. So like this was continuing all 1990s, 2000s now. And like the housing market goes into chaos. Like there was like street many people were just simply not able to pay their mortgage, and like they were now they now couldn't they were not buying any, and like the housing values and also many of them got evicted as a result from their homes, which led to more homelessness and like that, and like lower taxes and higher spending on these wars led to further debt. So like the surplus in the 1990s that quickly went back to debt in the 2000s, and then like recession came eventually, which was the largest crap recession since the 1920s depression. So like this is the largest recession, and like Democrats, Obama swept to power, and like they passed like some stimulus bills, and like they even passed like a healthcare measure, which although may seem like good, but like it wasn't really popular because like they didn't want like a lot of control of spending, and like there's because of the internet, as we can see in the 2010s, we are gonna find out it was going to lead to like some lots of chaos and stuff and involved in politics. So 2007, socially, a growing population movement occurs. So like Obama, because of Obama's measures and stuff, there's a lot of like theories, conspiracy theories. Some of them were blatantly wrong, which like many people were able to access due to the spread of the internet, because like the internet now is becoming so much, everyone was having a phone and device now they can. So like the Americans were becoming more divided because of this. So like, Republicans moved to the shifted far against Obama, against everything. So like they were a growing populism movement occurred, which was like more patriotism for the country and like that. So like, that was like the use of social media came and like the rich versus poor gap turned into social tension. And so like there's some movements called Occupy Wall Street, and Wall Street is like one of the biggest financial centers there's in the US. It included the New York Stock Exchange, the largest stock exchange in the world. And like that one street, many protesters came and like eventually they got cleared out, though it showed the clear tension between the rich one, they told the top 1% versus the bottom 99%. And like they had a good point. It's like the top 1%, like in order to have the top become the top 1%, you have to like have basically an income of over $1 million or more. And like the largest billionaires, they were getting super wealthy off of it. Like the 2010s, like I believe the richest person was around 40, $45 billion. Now that number has become over 200, $300 billion. You can see the clear trend in like that decade, and like many people were getting concerned about it. And like the youth population was getting increasingly involved all in like some issues like climate change and gun violence. So like you can see the gun violence actually increased. There's some many school shootings in America during the time. There's periodic school shootings in the other decades, though like 2010s, there's some notable ones, particularly Sandy Hooks, which is an elementary school where 20 students got killed. Well, and then like the Parkland, which was like a high school, well, like over 18 people got killed during that school in the school shooting, and there's many other shootings across America during this time, and it even is today. Like there's a recent one on there's a one 2 days ago in the news that was 5 people got shot the day, and like and then like 6 months ago there's another major shooting that was killed over 20 children in an elementary school. So like this is a problem clearly. So like many people and climate change obviously there's more of a consensus now, more people believe it now more than ever. It's like yeah, and then like the digital age affects society more than ever, so like it influenced the politics and everything. And then like everything was getting more social, and like everything, and like kids were that and like yeah, so like and then like politically, economically, Obama was president, those was seeing deeper debate. So like Obama had some successes. Like he was able to rebound the economy from the recession. He was able to pass some healthcare provisions. He was able to he was able to renegotiate deals with other countries like Iran, which really was some great big deals. And like he was able to end the war in Iraq and like begin reducing the Afghanistan forces. And like he killed Osama bin Laden, which was like the mastermind of 9/11, and which was a major achievement for many people, foreign policy wise. So like that was a very big achievement, though like Obama was controversial as like he put more conflict in the Middle East, like ISIS grew during this time in Syria and Iraq. They overthrew Libya under Secretary of State, it Hillary Clinton, foreign minister, basically. Yeah, like she ordered the overthrow of the Libyan government, which led to chaos in the country, more chaos than the corrupt government already brought to the country. So like there's a lot of chaos in the Middle East now because of and like Arab Spring and like all those. The US didn't do a good job showing those. Like and like people were just angry overall. Like even though some of the economy was good and stuff, social media was like spreading all this stuff, and like all this made people more angry. And like there's some reason for them to be angry. Like many of them were still struggling. It was like the rich versus poor thing and like all
Anchit,
the
one second, Anchit.
yeah.
The 40 minutes has elapsed. For the rest of the presentation and questions, we will open a new window. We don't mind.
Okay,
Mitra
sir.
and Anchit.
Okay, sir.
All right. Okay. So